That's how it felt when I drove back to my childhood home for spring break. The 4-hour drive from college had been long, but I'd imagined the reunion, seeing my parents, my little brother, Gabriel, the way we used to before everything got complicated. It was supposed to be a time for reconnecting, a break from the stress of my studies, and a chance to breathe in the familiar rhythm of home. But what I found when I pulled up to the driveway made my stomach twist into knots. The first thing I noticed was the for sale sign planted in the front yard, the edges of the cardboard frayed by the wind. My heart sank. I thought it was a mistake. Maybe they were selling the house, but I hadn't been informed. The windows were bare, no curtains hanging, no furniture visible inside. There was nothing. Not even the plants my mother used to water every morning. But the worst part? 3 black garbage bags sat on the porch, discarded like trash. My belongings. The clothes I'd left behind when I moved to college, the textbooks I hadn't bothered to take with me, the broken picture frame with a photo of my family at the beach, fragments of a life I once knew, all shoved into bags as if they didn't matter anymore. I stood there for a moment, staring, my knuckles white from gripping the steering wheel. I felt like I had just stepped into someone else's nightmare. The house that had once been full of warmth and memories now felt cold, distant. I didn't know what to do, where to turn. The weight of the silence felt unbearable. I took a deep breath and pulled out my phone, dialing my Uncle Thomas. Maybe he would have some answers, but when he picked up, I was hit with his hesitation, the uncertainty in his voice. "Harper, I didn't know you were coming. Your parents, they moved last week," he said, each word more distant than the last. "They should have told you, but I guess they didn't." Moved? I nearly dropped the phone. Moved without telling me? No warning, no explanation? I had been out of the loop, forgotten, erased. "What do you mean they moved? Where did they go? Why didn't anyone say anything?" "I don't know," he replied, the edge of discomfort in his tone growing. "Maybe you should call your dad." So I did. The phone rang, each tone getting longer, the tension building in my chest. When he finally answered, his voice was flat, lifeless. "Hello?" "Dad, the house is empty. There are bags of my stuff on the porch. What's going on?" I couldn't keep the panic from creeping into my voice. There was a long pause. Then he said, "We moved. You're an adult now, Harper. You'll figure it out." The line went dead before I could even respond. I stared at the screen, numb. My father, the man who had told me countless times that family was everything, had just hung up on me. Without a word of explanation, without an ounce of remorse. I tried calling again. Voicemail. My mom? Voicemail? Gabriel? Nothing. My little brother, who had always been the troublemaker, the one who never seemed to get things together, he wasn't there either. It was as if they had all vanished without a trace. They didn't want me anymore, and worse, they didn't even have the decency to tell me why. I stood in front of the house, watching the sunset cast long shadows across what used to be my front yard. The maple tree my father and I had planted when I was 8 still stood, but it seemed different now, like a monument to something lost. Something I would never get back. How could they do this? How could they just erase me? I didn't cry. Not then. Instead, I loaded up the garbage bags into my car, each item a reminder of the life I had built with them, now discarded like so much junk. I checked into a cheap motel that night. The sheets were scratchy, and the room smelled faintly of bleach and stale air, but I had no choice. I spread my things out on the bed, a few old textbooks, some winter clothes, a broken picture frame. The memories of a family had stopped being mine. The next morning, I made a decision. If they wanted to erase me, then I would do the same. I would cut all ties, rebuild from the ground up, and make something they could never take away from me. Family had always meant support, unconditional love, but if they couldn't offer that, then I would find it elsewhere. I had always been the responsible one, the quiet one who never caused trouble. And this was my reward. To be abandoned while my brother, who had barely scraped by in life, was shielded from all of this. I packed up the car and drove to a local coffee shop, my head spinning with thoughts of what to do next. I couldn't go back to the dorms, not now. And I couldn't go back to the life I'd just left behind. But I could go forward. I would go forward. Even if I had to build everything from scratch, I would show them, show myself, that I didn't need them, that I could make it on my own. And just maybe, I would make something they could never take away. I kept asking myself that question as I sat in the motel room the next morning, staring at the clothes and books I'd salvaged from those garbage bags. It felt surreal, like I had walked into a parallel universe where everything was familiar, but broken, shattered beyond recognition. My parents had always told me that education was my ticket to a better life. They had sacrificed everything to get me into college. And now, here I was, an adult, supposedly free to make my way, and yet, I felt more lost than I ever had before. The harsh reality of the situation began to settle in as I tried to figure out what to do next. I had no place to go. No home to return to, no family to turn to. I wasn't even sure I wanted to call them anymore. Their betrayal had cut too deep. It was early in the afternoon when I decided to call Professor Williams, my constitutional law professor. She'd been more than just an instructor to me. She had become something of a mentor, a figure of stability in a world that had started to feel completely unstable. "Hello?" she answered, her voice warm and welcoming, like nothing had changed. "Professor Williams," I said, my voice cracking slightly. "I don't know what to do. I came home for spring break and, well, my parents, they moved. They left. No warning. I'm standing in front of my old house right now, and it's empty. My stuff's in garbage bags on the porch. I don't even know where they are." I could hear her take a breath on the other end of the line. "Harper, I'm so sorry to hear that. That must be incredibly hard for you. But listen, you don't have to face this alone. You can stay with me until the dorms reopen. I have a guest room, and you're always welcome here." I didn't know what to say. I hadn't expected her to offer me a place to stay, but at that moment, her kindness felt like a lifeline thrown to me in a sea of uncertainty. It wasn't just the offer to stay in her home, it was the genuine concern in her voice, the reassurance that I wasn't as alone as I had started to believe. I don't know how to thank you," I said, feeling the lump in my throat tighten. "You don't need to," she replied. "Just focus on your studies, Harper. Let's figure things out when you get here." That night, after driving to Professor Williams's home, I collapsed into the guest room, feeling like a stranger in my own life. The bed was soft, the room tidy and peaceful, but I couldn't shake the gnawing emptiness inside. My family had always been my anchor, the only constant in my life. Now, it felt as if I had been untethered, left to float aimlessly. I spent the following days distracting myself with research. I buried myself in my pre-law textbooks and assignments, trying to make sense of everything around me, but it was hard to concentrate. The more I worked, the more my mind kept drifting back to the moment I found the garbage bags on the porch, the abandonment, the silence, the knowledge that my parents had chosen to leave without saying a word, without even acknowledging the years of sacrifices they had made to get me to this point. When I wasn't studying, I was working at a local cafe to make ends meet, just like I had back home. It wasn't glamorous, but it helped cover the bills. I hadn't grown up with a silver spoon in my mouth, and nothing about this situation was going to change that. My parents had always preached the value of hard work, so that's what I'd do. I'd keep working, keep pushing forward. But even with all the distractions, there were moments when the weight of everything threatened to overwhelm me. I thought of my brother, Gabriel, who had never quite fit in with the expectations our parents had set. He was always getting into trouble, always needing a little more attention than the rest of us, and yet he had never been cast aside the way I had. I couldn't stop thinking about how different my life had turned out compared to his. While I was busting my ass to get a scholarship to make something of myself, Gabriel seemed to coast by, never facing consequences for his mistakes. Why was he still their golden child? Why had they left me to fend for myself while they kept him close? One evening, after a particularly grueling day of studying and working at the cafe, I was sitting with Professor Williams in her cozy kitchen, sipping tea and talking about the future. She could sense my anxiety, my frustration, and she offered me a piece of advice that, at the time, felt almost like a revelation. Harper, you can't control what they've done, but you can control how you move forward from here. Focus on what you want to build, not on what's been destroyed. Sometimes the hardest part is just taking that first step forward. I didn't have a clear answer, not yet, but her words stayed with me. I knew I needed to keep moving forward, no matter how painful it felt. I needed to figure out what I could do with this second chance I'd been given. I wasn't going to let my parents' choices define me. I wasn't going to let their abandonment become my story. The following week, I met with Eleanor, one of the attorneys at Riverton Law Partners, to discuss the summer internship I had been offered. At first, it had seemed like just another way to gain experience, a stepping stone for my eventual legal career. But as Eleanor talked about the work they did, helping low-income families navigate housing discrimination cases, I began to realize something. This was the kind of work I could pour myself into, the kind of work that might help me find some meaning in the mess my life had become. Eleanor noticed the shift in my attitude immediately. "You're passionate about this, aren't you?" she asked, studying me closely. I nodded. "I think this is where I'm supposed to be. I want to do something that matters, something that helps people." "You've got the drive, Harper," she said, offering me a smile. "This is going to be good for you." The more I thought about it, the more I realized that maybe, just maybe, this was my chance to turn everything around. To use my pain, my frustration, as fuel for something bigger than myself. To prove not just to my family, but to myself that I could make a difference. And so, I made a choice. I was going to focus on my studies, throw myself into my work, and find a way to make the world a little bit better. I would rebuild my life, not from the broken pieces they had left me with, but from the ground up. I kept asking myself that question, day after day, as I threw myself into my internship at Riverton Law Partners. It wasn't just about the experience anymore. It was about something bigger, something that could give me the strength to keep moving forward. I wasn't sure if I was ready to turn my pain into something meaningful, but I had to try. I had to do something that would make me feel like I still had control over my future. I spent the first few weeks doing the typical internship grunt work, researching case files, organizing documents, making copies. But I quickly realized that the work at Riverton wasn't just about legal research. It was about people with real stories, facing real struggles. As I listened to these stories, something inside me started to change. The first time I sat in on an intake interview, it hit me like a ton of bricks. A single mother in her late 20s sat across from me, clutching her toddler's hand, explaining how her landlord had suddenly decided to raise her rent by 40%. She was already struggling to make ends meet, and now she faced the possibility of being evicted because she couldn't afford the increase. The woman's eyes were wide with fear as she spoke, and I could feel the weight of her situation pressing down on her, on all of us in that room. Her vulnerability was palpable. But it wasn't just about the legal side of things. It was about the human side of it. The desperation, the sense of helplessness. I could see it in her face. I could feel it in my chest. "What can we do to help her?" I asked Eleanor after the interview, my voice tight with emotion. Eleanor gave me a sympathetic smile. "We can help her understand her rights and find ways to challenge this eviction. But what we need is to create something that addresses these issues before they happen. Something that provides support for students and low-income families before they face this kind of crisis." It was then that I had the idea, a program, an initiative that could offer support, resources, and a voice to people who needed it most. A way to stop the pain before it even started. The idea for the Safe Space Initiative was born that day. It wasn't just about offering legal help, it was about creating a community, a safe space for students, families, and anyone else at risk of losing their homes. A place where people could find resources, emotional support, and most importantly, hope. A space where they wouldn't feel alone in their fight against an unfair system. I wanted to create a place where people could go when they had no other options, a place where their stories would be heard. At first, it was just a rough idea, a few pages of notes scribbled during a lunch break, outlining what the program could look like and how it might function. But the more I thought about it, the more I realized it was exactly what the community needed. A program like this could change lives, and maybe, just maybe, it could give me the strength I needed to rebuild mine. I pitched the idea to Eleanor and Professor Williams, and they both encouraged me to pursue it. Professor Williams, in particular, was enthusiastic. "You have the drive, Harper. If anyone can make this work, it's you," she told me. Her belief in me gave me the confidence to take the next step. With their support, I began drafting a proposal. I spent hours researching housing laws, looking into the needs of students and low-income families in the area, and figuring out how we could raise the funds to get the program off the ground. I called local organizations, reached out to other nonprofits, and began to build the network of support we would need to make Safe Space a reality. It wasn't easy. It was exhausting. There were nights when I stayed up late, my mind racing with ideas and worries, trying to figure out how to make it all work. But I couldn't stop. I couldn't let the fear of failure hold me back. Not after everything I'd been through. Not after seeing the faces of the people I was trying to help. As I worked on the initiative, I found myself gaining more and more confidence in my abilities. It was as though the work itself was rebuilding me. Each case I worked on, each family I helped, felt like another brick in the foundation of something stronger than I had ever imagined. It wasn't just about the legal battles. It was about giving people the tools they needed to stand up for themselves, to fight back against the systems that tried to push them down. It was about making sure they knew they weren't alone. Somewhere along the way, I started to believe in myself again. I started to believe that I was capable of more than just surviving. I could thrive, I could build something that mattered, and maybe, just maybe, that something could help heal the part of me that had been broken by my family's abandonment. But it wasn't just about healing. It was about making a difference. Every family that was able to stay in their home, every student who avoided eviction, felt like a victory. Each success fueled my drive, kept me going through the late nights and early mornings. Safe Space became more than just an initiative. It became my mission. And as I stood in front of the team at Riverton Law Partners, pitching the final version of the program, I realized that this was what I was meant to do. I had found my purpose. I was no longer the abandoned daughter, forgotten and discarded. I was someone who could make a difference, and I would. Safe Space wasn't just about helping others. It was about helping myself. It was about turning the pain I had felt from my family's betrayal into something powerful. Something that would outlast the past and give me the future I had always dreamed of. The Safe Space initiative was just the beginning. The question haunted me, even as my life seemed to be gaining some momentum. Safe Space was growing. It was gaining traction in the community. People were reaching out, families were being helped, and my legal internship was progressing smoothly. I was finally starting to feel like I was building something of my own. But despite all the progress, despite all the work I was doing to create a life that mattered, I couldn't escape the weight of my family's absence. It was as if they had erased themselves from my life entirely. And the silence was deafening. Months had passed since I'd found my belongings on the porch, since my parents and brother had vanished without a word. At first, I kept hoping for some kind of explanation, some kind of gesture that would bridge the chasm they had left behind. But as the weeks turned into months, that hope slowly turned to bitterness. There was no explanation. There was no apology. Their absence wasn't just painful, it was suffocating. I had blocked their numbers, removed their contacts from my phone, and distanced myself from anyone who might have any connection to them. It wasn't that I didn't want to forgive them, it was that I couldn't let myself. Not yet. Not when they hadn't even admitted they'd done anything wrong. How could I forgive someone who didn't even recognize the harm they'd caused? But even as I put up these walls, the phone calls kept coming. At first, they were just occasional voicemails from my dad, asking if I was okay. Then, as the months went by, the frequency picked up. It became a daily barrage of voicemails, often with the same message. "We miss you. Please call us. We want to make things right." And then, they started showing up in my inbox. Emails, texts, even messages from my aunts and uncles asking me to reconsider. "They're sorry, Harper. They've made a mistake. They want you back." I couldn't understand it. Why now? After all this time, after they had made it clear I didn't matter enough to be told they were leaving? Why did they suddenly care? I tried not to think about it. I buried myself in my work, focusing on safe space. More and more families were reaching out. More students needed help, and every case felt like a small victory. The program was helping people, and it felt good to be making a difference. But every victory, every success, was always accompanied by the quiet, gnawing feeling of betrayal that never quite went away. One afternoon, while I was at Riverton Law Partners reviewing intake notes for a new case, I got a call. It was from my father. Again. I ignored it. This time, I let the voicemail go to the usual place, silent and untouched. But just as I was about to hit delete, something stopped me. I paused, hovering over the screen, before deciding to listen. The voicemail was long, but it only took a few seconds for me to hear what I dreaded most. My father's voice, thick with emotion, cracked as he spoke. "Harper, we've been trying to reach you. Your mother, she's been having a hard time. She misses you, Harper. We all do. You're our daughter. You have to know that we never wanted to hurt you. We thought we were doing what was best for you, but we made a mistake. We should have told you. Please, come back home. Please." The words felt like a slap in the face. How could he say that now? We thought we were doing what was best for you. Was that the excuse? I wasn't a child anymore. I wasn't some naive little girl who needed to be protected from the harsh realities of life. What they had done wasn't about protecting me. It was about abandoning me when I was strong enough to stand on my own. They had left me with nothing but garbage bags full of my belongings, without a single word of explanation. As the voicemail ended, a cold wave of anger swept over me. I felt like I was suffocating, and I couldn't breathe through the sudden rush of emotion. The anger was sharp, but it was also familiar. It was the same anger I'd felt when I stood in front of that empty house, looking at the bags that held my memories. I thought about calling them back, confronting them, demanding the answers I deserved. But what good would it do? They still hadn't acknowledged the depth of their mistake. They hadn't said sorry in a way that meant anything. All they wanted was for me to pick up the pieces of their broken lives and fix them. I wasn't going to be their emotional band-aid anymore. I stood up, pacing back and forth in my office at Riverton. The anger was replaced by a deep, weary sadness. I couldn't go back to that. I couldn't go back to a family that had discarded me so easily, only to want me back when things were convenient. This wasn't about reconciliation. It was about them wanting to feel better about their decisions, about making themselves feel absolved without taking responsibility. I slammed my phone down onto the desk, my hands trembling slightly. That was it. I couldn't keep doing this. I couldn't keep pretending that everything was fine when it wasn't. I had to focus on what mattered, my future. I couldn't let my family's mistakes ruin everything I had worked for. But just as I was about to get back to work, there was a knock at the door. It was Eleanor, standing there with a concerned look on her face. "You okay?" she asked, leaning in slightly. I looked at her, trying to steady my breath. "Yeah, my parents called again. I don't know what they want anymore." Eleanor nodded, stepping into the room. "I get it. It's hard, Harper. But you don't have to go through this alone. You've built something here. You've built something important. And that's what matters now. Not them. Not what they've done. You've found your place, your purpose." I looked at her, feeling a lump form in my throat. She was right. It was hard to face the truth, to let go of the people who were supposed to love me unconditionally. But Eleanor was also right about something else. I had found my place. I had found my purpose. I was doing something that mattered. And no matter what my family did or didn't do, that was something they could never take from me. So I made a decision. I blocked their numbers. All of them. My parents, my brother. I wasn't going to be part of their toxic cycle anymore. I had to protect myself from their inability to see me, to respect me, to love me the way I deserved. Safe space had become my new family, and it was stronger than anything my bloodline had ever given me. And I was going to continue building it, no matter what. I had been moving forward, determined to build my life on my terms. I had blocked my family's calls, refused to acknowledge their messages, and put all my energy into making safe space a success. It felt good, even freeing, to finally be able to say that I didn't need them. I didn't need anyone who would abandon me like they had. I was going to carve my path, one where my past didn't hold any power over me. But the truth has a way of catching up with you, no matter how far you try to run from it. It happened one afternoon when I received an unexpected phone call. The area code was from my hometown, and for a brief moment, I considered ignoring it. But something stopped me, and against my better judgment, I answered. "Hello?" I said, my voice tight, prepared for another barrage of guilt-laden messages from my parents. "Harper, it's Mrs. Hernandez," came the voice of our former neighbor. My stomach twisted. "I hope it's okay that I called you. Your brother gave me your number. He said you might not answer if you saw their names on the caller ID." I didn't know what to say. Mrs. Hernandez had always been kind, but I hadn't spoken to her since the day I found my house empty. "What is it, Mrs. Hernandez?" I asked, my voice sounding more strained than I intended. "There's been a break-in at your old house," she continued. "The police think the intruder was looking for valuables, but there's nothing in the house. It's empty. Your father asked me to check if maybe you came back for something, but I told him you hadn't been there." I felt a strange mix of relief and unease. A part of me was glad they hadn't tried to break into my new life, but another part of me still felt the sting of that empty house, the memory of those garbage bags filled with my things. "I haven't been back," I said quietly. "I don't even have the keys anymore." Mrs. Hernandez hesitated before speaking again, her tone hesitant. "Well, there's something else. The police gave me an envelope to pass on to you. It's addressed to you, but it looks official. It's from a law firm." My heart skipped a beat. A law firm? I didn't know what to think, but curiosity got the better of me. "Can you open it? What does it say?" I asked, my voice trembling slightly despite my best efforts to stay composed. There was a moment of silence on the other end, followed by the sound of paper being unfolded. "It's about your grandmother's estate," Mrs. Hernandez said, her voice slow, as if she were still processing the information herself. "It looks like she left you an inheritance." Inheritance? My grandmother passed away years ago when I was just 13. I barely remembered her, and I never expected anything from her estate. She had always lived a modest life as far as I knew. "What does it say about the inheritance?" I asked, my voice tight with a mix of disbelief and confusion. Mrs. Hernandez paused for a long moment before continuing. "It says you've inherited property in Mexico. There's a bank statement, Harper. It shows over $400,000. My mind raced. $400,000? My grandmother? It didn't make sense. She had lived so simply, had never been wealthy by any standard. There was no way she had that kind of money. "Are you sure?" I asked, my voice rising slightly. "That can't be right. My grandmother, she didn't have that kind of money." "I don't know, honey. The letter says the property was developed after she died. Resort condominiums. It says your portion is from the sale of 2 units. That's all it says." I felt dizzy. A resort? Money from the sale of condos? It felt surreal, as if I were suddenly living someone else's life. "Do you have the contact info for the law firm?" I asked, trying to steady myself. I had to know more. This couldn't just be some mistake. "I do," Mrs. Hernandez replied, reading off the details. "I'll send the envelope to you, Harper. It looks like the property's already been sold, and they're ready to transfer the funds to you. You just need to sign some papers." I could barely process it all. An inheritance. My family had kept this from me. They knew about this money and had never once mentioned it. Had they known about it when they moved? Had they kept it hidden from me for all this time? I sat in silence for a moment, the weight of the truth sinking in. They hadn't just abandoned me because of financial difficulties, as they had claimed. They hadn't been trying to protect me from their shame. No, they had known about the inheritance, the $400,000, and had kept it from me. The entire time they had been planning their exit, they had been sitting on this secret, knowing I was entitled to it, but choosing to leave me behind anyway. The betrayal hit me harder than I expected. It wasn't just that they had abandoned me. It was that they had used me. They had sold the house without telling me, thrown my belongings into garbage bags, and moved on with their lives as though I meant nothing to them. And now, they had taken something that belonged to me. I felt my heart rate quicken as the full impact of what had happened hit me. They hadn't just erased me from their lives, they had stolen from me. The rest of the afternoon passed in a blur. I called the law firm, confirmed the legitimacy of the inheritance, and arranged for the funds to be transferred to my account. But even as I did, a part of me couldn't shake the overwhelming sense of disgust. My family had abandoned me and kept this secret from me all along, and I couldn't understand why. Why not just tell me the truth? Why not just ask for help if they needed it? That night, as I sat in my motel room with the official papers in front of me, I couldn't stop thinking about my parents' words. "We thought we were doing what was best for you," my father had said. But what if the truth was simpler than that? What if it was all about the money? What if they had abandoned me because they didn't want to share what they knew was coming? The inheritance wasn't just money. It was the final confirmation of everything I had suspected, that they had used me, that they had put their pride before me, that they had chosen greed over family. I was no longer the abandoned daughter, lost and helpless. I was someone who had taken control of her own life, someone who had built something from nothing, despite the betrayal. And now, I was building something even bigger than that. Safe Space would continue to grow. It would continue to help others, and it would continue to be my legacy. Not just a legacy of success, but a reminder that I didn't need my family to validate me. I was enough on my own. And with that inheritance, I could finally move on, knowing that their actions, their lies, no longer had any hold over me. I would rebuild. I would rise. And nothing they did or didn't do could ever change that. I had managed to rebuild my life step by step. It wasn't easy. It was a journey full of bumps, obstacles, and emotional tolls that left their marks. But I was getting there. Safe Space was growing. I had secured funding, expanded our reach, and started to develop a reputation for being a young, driven advocate for low-income families facing housing insecurity. I was finally becoming the person I had always dreamed of being, someone with purpose, someone who could make a real difference. But just when I thought I was on solid ground, just when I thought I had cut the last tie to my old life, they showed up. My family. It was a Saturday morning when I got the email. At first, I thought it was just another piece of junk mail, some random newsletter, or a marketing ploy from an organization I didn't recognize. But when I saw the subject line, "Urgent, your family wants to speak with you," my stomach twisted. I sat there for a moment, staring at the screen, as if trying to will the words to disappear. But they didn't. It was a simple message, one from my mother. "We've seen your success. We've read about what you're doing. We're proud of you, Harper. We want to talk. Please, let us explain." I should have ignored it. I should have deleted it like all the other messages they had sent over the months. I had worked hard to block them from my life, to protect myself from their manipulations. I had chosen to let go of the family that had abandoned me, and I had finally found peace in doing so. But something in me couldn't resist. Maybe it was curiosity. Maybe it was a desperate hope that they had finally seen the damage they had caused and wanted to make it right. Maybe it was the lingering piece of me that still longed for their love, even though I knew deep down that love didn't look the way they had treated me. So I called them back. The phone rang for what felt like an eternity. When my mother finally picked up, her voice sounded hesitant, as though she was unsure of what to say. "Harper," she began, "we've been trying to reach you for months. I don't know where to begin." Her voice cracked. "We made a terrible mistake." I felt my heart beat faster, but I couldn't bring myself to speak. I just listened, waiting for the words that would come next. "Your father and we were afraid," she continued. "We didn't want to burden you with our problems. The house was being foreclosed on. We didn't want you to know, so we decided to leave. It wasn't about you, Harper. We thought we were protecting you, but now I see how wrong we were." There it was. The explanation I had been waiting for, the one I had wanted so desperately to hear when I first found my belongings in garbage bags on the porch. But as the words hit my ears, something inside me shifted. A coldness took root in my chest. We thought we were protecting you. It wasn't enough. The words weren't enough to erase the hurt, the abandonment, the way they had left me behind without a second thought. All these months, they had lived their lives without me, without any real acknowledgement of what they had done. And now, just when I was beginning to build something for myself, they wanted to come back into my life and ask for forgiveness? I wasn't sure I could do that. "I'm sorry, Mom," I said quietly, my voice steady despite the rising tide of emotion. "But I don't think I can forgive you for this. You didn't protect me. You left me. You threw my life away like it meant nothing." There was a long silence on the other end of the phone. I could hear her breathing, but I couldn't bring myself to say anything more. I didn't need to say more. I had already said it all with those simple words. "I know, Harper," she said, her voice thick with emotion. "I know. And I regret it every day." I wasn't sure what I expected from that conversation. I didn't expect an apology that would suddenly make everything okay. I didn't expect some magic words that would make me feel better. But even so, there was something about hearing her say that she regretted what had happened that made me pause. For just a moment, I felt a small crack in the wall I had built around my heart. But that didn't mean I was ready to let them back into my life. "Do you think we can ever start over?" she asked, almost pleading. "We want to be part of your life again, Harper. We want to make things right." The question hung in the air between us, and for a moment, I didn't know what to say. Could I start over with them? Could I just wipe the slate clean and pretend that nothing had happened? Could I erase the memory of being abandoned? Of having my entire life turned upside down for reasons that still didn't make sense to me? "No," I said, my voice quiet but firm. "I've already started over. I've built something that matters to me, and I've done it without you. I can't just forget how you treated me. I can't just pretend everything's okay." There was no more talking after that. We both knew where I stood, and neither of us had the words to make it right. In the end, it was just another empty apology, another attempt to make themselves feel better. But that wasn't enough for me anymore. I hung up the phone, feeling a strange sense of calm. The anger had dissipated, replaced by something deeper, something that felt like acceptance. I didn't need them, not anymore. I had my own life now, my purpose, my own family that I had built through safe space and the people who supported me. Later that day, I received another call. It was from my father, but I didn't answer. I didn't need to. They had already done enough damage. As I stood there, looking at my phone, I made a vow to myself. I was done with them. I was done with the past. From now on, I would only move forward. I would continue to build safe space, continue to help others, and continue to prove to myself that I didn't need my family to validate my worth. I had done it on my own, and that was enough. The phone call with my parents had left me numb, but there was no time to dwell on it. My life was moving forward, and there was a part of me that knew that no matter what happened with my family, no matter how they tried to re-enter my life, I had built something stronger. I had built Safe Space, an initiative that was finally starting to take off to make a real impact in the community. And now, after months of hard work, I was facing the culmination of it all. A presentation to the Watkins Foundation for a grant that could expand our work beyond the university and into the broader community. The day of the presentation was the first time in months that I felt the weight of everything crash down on me. All the work, all the effort, all the late nights and early mornings, it was all leading up to this moment. I had spent weeks preparing, fine-tuning every detail of our proposal, making sure that it was perfect. This was the opportunity I had been waiting for, the chance to truly make Safe Space into something sustainable. But despite all the preparation, despite how ready I thought I was, I couldn't shake the knot of anxiety in my stomach. I dressed carefully that morning, a navy blazer over a simple blouse, professional but not too intimidating. I had rehearsed my pitch countless times, smoothing out every word, making sure that I could convey both the passion and the precision needed to convince the board that Safe Space was worth their investment. This wasn't just about money. It was about showing them that we could change lives, that we could make a difference. As I arrived at the foundation's offices, I was struck by the sleek, modern building, glass walls, minimalist decor, the kind of place that looked like it belonged in a city skyline. I was nervous, yes, but there was also a part of me that felt grounded, focused. This was my moment. The foundation's support could change everything for Safe Space, could give us the resources to reach even more families, even more students who were facing the kind of housing insecurity I knew all too well. I arrived early to review my notes one last time, my fingers nervously tapping on the tabletop. Eleanor, my supervisor, arrived shortly after me, looking as composed as always in a charcoal suit. She was the picture of professionalism, and as I glanced at her, I couldn't help but feel a surge of gratitude. Without her, I wouldn't be here. Without her guidance and mentorship, Safe Space would have remained a mere idea, a hopeful dream. She had taken me under her wing, offering support, encouragement, and a steady hand through the rough patches. "Are you ready?" she asked, her voice calm, almost soothing. I nodded, though the knot in my stomach still hadn't loosened. "As ready as I'll ever be," I said, forcing a smile. We were escorted into the boardroom about 20 minutes later, and as I walked in, I was immediately struck by the formality of the setting. 8 people were seated around a polished conference table, their eyes scanning their notes, occasionally glancing up at me as I took my seat. Among them was William Watkins, the foundation's director, a man who had made his fortune in real estate development. I had read a lot about him during my research, and I knew he was a man who didn't make decisions lightly. "Ms. Rojas, Ms. Grayson," he said, standing up to greet us. His handshake was firm, but his eyes were sharp, evaluating. "We've been impressed by your written proposal. Show us why Safe Space deserves our support." I swallowed, my heart pounding. This was it, the moment I had worked so hard for. I connected my laptop to the projector and began my presentation. I outlined Safe Space's mission, how we had started as a small student-run project at the university, and how, through sheer dedication and community support, we had expanded into something much bigger. I spoke about the families we had helped, the students we had kept from eviction, and the systemic issues we were addressing. I emphasized the impact Safe Space was having on the lives of people who were often forgotten by the system, families at risk of homelessness, students struggling to find affordable housing, and seniors facing predatory rent hikes. As I spoke, I could feel the passion I had for the work seeping into my words. This wasn't just a business pitch to me. It was my life's work, the embodiment of everything I had poured myself into since my parents had walked out of my life. It was my chance to prove that I was capable of more than they ever believed I could be. Eleanor chimed in at key moments, adding legal context and explaining the technical aspects of our approach, but mostly, I was the one in the spotlight. The board members were engaged, asking insightful questions, probing into the specifics of how Safe Space could grow and expand into other areas of need. I answered each question with as much confidence as I could muster, relying on the months of preparation that had brought me there. And then, just as I was wrapping up my final point about our plans for future expansion, the door to the boardroom opened. A foundation assistant whispered something to Mr. Watkins, and he nodded, gesturing for me to continue. "I apologize for the interruption," he said, his voice polite but firm. "Ms. Rojas, there are some people here claiming to be your family. They're insisting on speaking with you. They say it's urgent." My heart skipped a beat. My family? Were they here? Now? I froze for a split second, trying to collect myself. My mind raced, thoughts flashing back to the phone call with my mother just days earlier, the emotional weight of our conversation still hanging in the air. "Please tell them I'll speak with them after the presentation," I said, my voice remarkably steady despite the churn of emotion swirling inside me. "This is too important to interrupt." Mr. Watkins nodded approvingly, and the assistant left to deliver my message. I turned back to the board, my hands trembling slightly as I clicked through the final slides of the presentation. I had to finish this. I couldn't let my family's sudden appearance throw me off course. Not now, not when I was so close. I completed the presentation with a final flourish, speaking about our vision for the future, the partnerships we hoped to build, and the long-term impact we expected to achieve. As I wrapped up, I could feel the weight of their scrutiny, The eyes of the board members locked onto me, watching, evaluating, deciding. The questions came fast and sharp, but I answered them all with a calm I hadn't known I was capable of. When the board finally thanked me for my time and promised to decide within the next 2 weeks, I felt an overwhelming sense of relief wash over me. "Thank you," I said, gathering my notes and shaking hands with each board member. "It's been an honor." Eleanor gave me a reassuring smile as we left the room. "You did great, Harper," she said, her voice filled with pride. "I'm proud of you." But as we stepped into the hallway, my phone buzzed. Another message, another call from my mother. I didn't check it. I didn't need to. I had just given everything I had to that presentation. I had just proven that I could do this on my own. No matter what happened with my family, I had found a family in the people I worked with, in the families I helped, and in the purpose I had created. And nothing they did could ever take that away from me. The days after the presentation were a blur. Safe Space had reached a pivotal moment, and I was filled with a mix of anticipation and exhaustion. My phone, once a constant source of stress from my parents' calls and messages, had become a lifeline for the future of the program. More families were reaching out for help. More students were finding their way to us, and I could feel that we were on the verge of something much bigger. The grant from the Watkins Foundation could be the key to securing long-term funding to truly expanding Safe Space into a sustainable resource for those who need it most. But even as I focused on the future, I couldn't completely escape the past. The calls from my parents hadn't stopped. My father's voicemails had become more frequent, more pleading. My brother had tried texting me, sending messages that felt more like apologies than anything else. But I had turned away from them. I had made my decision. I wasn't going back. I wasn't going to let them into my life again just because they felt guilty, just because they wanted to fix what they had broken without truly acknowledging their actions. Then, the unexpected happened. It was late in the afternoon when I received another email from the Watkins Foundation. It wasn't what I expected, no decision, no final word about the grant, but an invitation to meet with the board in person for a follow-up. The message was clear. They wanted to discuss our proposal further. My heart raced. This was it. This was the moment I had worked so hard for, the moment I had been preparing for since I first came up with the idea for Safe Space. But just as I was about to confirm the meeting, I got a call. It was my mother. Again. I almost didn't answer. I didn't want to be distracted. I didn't want to hear her voice, asking for forgiveness, explaining why she had left me behind. But as the phone rang, I realized I couldn't just keep avoiding them. I couldn't keep running from the fact that they were part of my life, whether I liked it or not. "Harper," she said, her voice trembling, "I know you've been busy. I know things are different now, but please, we need to talk. Your father is... well, he's not doing well. He's been asking for you. He misses you." The words hit me harder than I expected. I hadn't anticipated hearing this, especially not after everything that had happened. The coldness between us, the months of silence, the years of unanswered questions. But hearing her say that my father was struggling, hearing her voice crack with emotion, made something stir in me. "I'm not sure what you want from me, Mom," I replied, my voice steady but weary. "I've moved on. I've built my own life. I can't just drop everything because you're suddenly asking for my forgiveness." "I know," she said, her voice soft, almost pleading. "I understand that, but I need you to know that we've made a terrible mistake, and we want to make things right. We're not asking you to forget, Harper. We're asking for a chance to make amends." I paused, feeling the weight of her words settle on me. It wasn't just the apology, it was the desperation in her voice. My father had always been the proud one, the one who refused to show weakness. But now it seemed like he had come to terms with his pride, or at least was beginning to. But still, the questions lingered in my mind. Why now? After all the months of silence, why were they coming back now? Was it because they were truly sorry? Or was it because of the inheritance? Because of the money I had inherited from my grandmother? Before I could respond, the door to my office opened. It was Eleanor. She looked at me with a quiet understanding, her gaze fixed on the phone in my hand. She had been with me every step of the way through this journey, through the highs and the lows, and I knew she could sense what was happening. "Harper," she said gently, "you don't have to answer right now. You've already made your decision. You've worked so hard to get here. Don't let them pull you back into a situation that doesn't serve you. You've built something good, something that matters. That's where your focus should be." I looked at Eleanor, her words sinking in deeper than I could have anticipated. It wasn't just about my parents anymore. It was about me, about what I had built, what I had achieved. I had fought too hard to get to this point to let the past derail everything. "I can't keep running, Eleanor," I said, my voice steady despite the storm brewing inside me. "But I also can't go back to what they want me to be. They may have been my family, but they're not the people I need to be around anymore. Not after everything." Eleanor nodded, a small smile tugging at the corner of her lips. "You don't have to go back, but that doesn't mean you have to close the door entirely either. It's okay to set boundaries. It's okay to protect yourself." I took a deep breath, feeling the tension release from my shoulders. It was time to make my choice. I didn't need to answer their calls or take their guilt. I didn't need to forgive them, not yet. What I needed was to protect the life I had worked so hard to create, the one that didn't depend on their approval. When I finally ended the call with my mother, I felt a strange sense of peace. I had made my decision. I wasn't going to let them drag me back into the cycle of pain and disappointment. I wasn't going to give up what I had built, not for anything. The past was behind me. Then the email notification pinged again. The Watkins Foundation had sent their decision. I clicked the email open, my heart racing. Safe Space Initiative had been awarded the full grant amount. The weight lifted from my chest as I read the email over and over again. This was it. Safe Space would expand. We would continue to help families, fight against housing insecurity, and build a future that was brighter than the past. My phone buzzed again. Another voicemail. This time, it was from my father. "Harper, we're still waiting to hear from you. Please. This isn't just about the past. It's about us. It's about family." But I didn't need to respond. I didn't need to answer anymore. As I sat back in my chair, I looked out the window at the city skyline. I could feel the weight of the world lifting off my shoulders. It wasn't just about the grant. It was about knowing that I had built something that could never be taken away from me, something real, something meaningful. As I moved forward, I realized that I had finally found the family I had been searching for. It wasn't the one I had been born into. It was the one I had built myself. And that family? It was everything.
Sophia Bennett stands before her family's weathered wooden home in Bend, Oregon, a house she saved with $15,000 for the mortgage, countless repairs, and endless grocery runs. Her hands grip a document, her parents' will, leaving everything. The $400,000 house, retirement savings, even life insurance, to her brother Ethan, who's never lifted a finger. Sophia's voiceover cuts through, steady yet piercing. "I gave them my savings, my time, my dreams. They chose him, and now they expect me to keep giving." A quick flash. Her phone lights up with a text from her mother. "Sophia, we need $3,000. She shuts it off. Final words. "I'm not angry. I'm done." Tense strings swell. A slow drumbeat pulses, and the screen fades to black, leaving viewers craving the story's unraveling. The autumn air in Bend, Oregon, carries a crisp bite, swirling leaves across the quiet street where the family's two-story wooden house stands. Its faded shutters and creaking front porch betray years of wear, though the protagonist has patched its wounds time and again, replacing shingles after storms, sealing cracks in the foundation, even rewiring the porch light when it flickered out last winter. She pulls into the gravel driveway, her sedan crunching softly, and steps out with a laptop bag slung over her shoulder. Her father has called her over, as he often does, to wrestle with the scanner that hums but never obeys his commands. It's a routine she knows well, sorting medical forms, untangling insurance claims, making sense of the chaos he can't. Today, the task feels heavier, though she can't yet name why. Inside, the living room smells of old coffee and cedar. The dining table is buried under papers, hospital bills, a water heater warranty, a scribbled note about a dentist appointment. She sets up the scanner, its green light flickering as it warms. Her father shuffles in, clutching a mug, his voice gruff but warm. "You're a lifesaver with this tech stuff," he says, settling into a chair. She nods, half smiling, though her work in project management has little to do with machines. It's just what she does: steps in, fixes things, keeps the wheels turning. The stack of documents yields quickly under her hands: a Medicare form, a utility bill, a prescription renewal. Then her fingers brush a forest green folder, its edges crisp, labeled in her mother's meticulous cursive, "Estate Plan, Final Draft." She hesitates. The weight of the folder feels different, like a secret meant to stay closed. She shouldn't open it. She knows this. Last month, she'd covered $2,000 for the property taxes to keep the county at bay. Last week, she'd driven 12 miles to the pharmacy for their heart medication. As always, curiosity, or perhaps exhaustion, wins. The folder opens with a soft creak, revealing a notarized will dated 3 months ago. Her eyes scan the pages, and the world narrows to a single truth. The house, worth $400,000, fully paid off. The retirement accounts, a dwindling but substantial sum. The life insurance policy, all bequeathed to her brother. Her name appears once, in a sterile line. "We love our children equally and trust them to support one another." Nothing about the taxes she paid. Nothing about the $5,000 she wired for the roof repair 2 years ago. Not even a whisper of gratitude. Just a polite dismissal, as if her sacrifices were expected, unremarkable. Her breath catches, shallow and uneven, but her hands remain steady. The scanner hums in the background, oblivious. She stares at the paper, the ink blurring, slightly, though her eyes are dry. Her father re-enters, mug still in hand, and pauses when he sees the folder. "Everything okay?" he asks, voice cautious. She holds up the document, her tone low, deliberate. "Is this how it is? Everything to him?" He freezes, coffee halfway, to his lips, then exhales. A long, weary sound that confirms he's known this moment might come. "It's not what you think," he says, but the words lack conviction. She doesn't respond, letting the silence press against him. He shifts, uncomfortable, and mumbles, "You've always managed, always come through." The phrase lands, like a stone, managed, as if her strength absolves them of fairness. She sets the folder down, acts deliberate, and steps outside. The porch swing sways slightly under her weight, its chains groaning from the replacement she installed 3 summers ago. The same week she paid a contractor $800 to fix the warped deck boards. Her brother had promised to chip in but never did, citing another tight month. She gazes at the massive oak tree across the yard, its trunk scarred with his initials, carved during a teenage fling. Did he ever notice the $1,000 she paid to prune it after a storm cracked its branches? Did they ever consider the cost, not just in dollars, but in the plans she deferred, the nights she spent balancing their budget instead of her own? The swing creaks once more, then stills. Inside, the scanner's hum persists, a faint echo through the screen door. She breathes deeply, the cold air sharp in her lungs, and wonders if they ever saw her at all, or only the safety net she provided. The late October sunlight filters through the oak leaves, casting dappled shadows across the front yard where she sits, the porch swing still beneath her. A breeze carries the faint scent of pine from the nearby cascades, but her thoughts drift far from the tranquil landscape. Memories surface, unbidden, of moments when she poured herself into the family's survival, each act of giving chipping away at her horizons. 6 years ago, during a bitter winter when the temperature plummeted to 15 degrees Fahrenheit, The water heater in the house failed. She drove 20 miles through sleet to meet the plumber, handing over $3,000 from her savings, without a second thought. Her brother, lounging in the basement, had shrugged, saying he'd figure out his share later. He never did. She recalls the spring 4 years back when the family's car, a rusted sedan, broke down, leaving her parents stranded. She paid $2,500 for a new transmission, ensuring they could get to doctor's appointments and the grocery store 8 miles away. That same year, she spent countless evenings on the phone, negotiating with creditors to waive late fees on their credit cards, saving them hundreds in penalties. These weren't grand gestures. They were quiet necessities, woven into her routine, like breathing. She never asked for thanks, only hoped they noticed. Her mind shifts to a sharper sacrifice, a job offer in Denver, 2 years ago, with a title bump and a salary increase of $25,000 annually. The city's vibrant energy had called to her, a chance to build a life untethered. But her mother's voice, trembling over the phone, had stopped her. "It's hard to think of you so far away." So she stayed, anchoring herself to Bend, to the house, to the endless cycle of needs. The promotion she'd earned instead was smaller, the raise modest, but she told herself family came first. Now, staring at the oak's gnarled branches, she wonders if they ever understood what she surrendered, not just money, but the freedom to dream beyond their crises. Her brother's presence lingers in these memories, a shadow of inaction. While she balanced their parents' budget, he spent days tinkering with a guitar, recording songs that never found an audience beyond a handful of online clicks. Their parents would smile, saying he was still searching for his spark, as if her steadiness made his aimlessness forgivable. The unfairness gnaws at her, not as anger, but as a heavy, hollow ache. Did they see her as more than a fixer? A resource to tap when the world pressed too hard? The swing's chains glint in, the fading light, a reminder of the $400 she spent to replace them, a task her brother promised to help with but forgot. She leans back, the cold wood pressing against her spine, and lets the question settle. How much of herself has she given to a house, a family, that never truly claimed her? The distant hum of a neighbor's lawnmower cuts through the silence, grounding her in the present. The will's words echo in her mind, trust them to support one another. But the trust feels one-sided. Her sacrifice is a currency they spent without counting. The porch swing hangs motionless as she stands, the chill of late October seeping through her jacket. Across the yard, the oak tree looms, its bare branches stark against the graying sky. Inside, the hum of the scanner has stopped, replaced by the soft clinking of dishes from the kitchen where her mother moves, unaware of the storm brewing. She lingers a moment, the weight of the will's words still burning in her chest, then steps back into the house. Her mother, clad in a worn flannel shirt, glances up from the sink, her hands pausing mid-scrub. "You staying for dinner?" she asks, voice light but cautious, as if sensing the shift. The protagonist doesn't answer right away. Instead, she sets the green folder on the counter, its presence louder than any words. Her mother's eyes flicker to the folder, then back to her daughter, a nervous twitch at the corner of her mouth. "We didn't mean for you to see it like that," she says, drying her hands on a towel. The protagonist's voice is low, steady. "Why didn't you tell me?" The question hangs, unanswered, until her mother sighs, a sound too small for the truth it carries. "Your brother needed the security," she says softly. "He's had it harder, you know that. You've always been the strong one." The words sting not for their kindness but for their assumption that strength means she requires nothing, owes everything. She presses further, her tone unwavering. "What security?" Her mother hesitates, then admits, almost in a whisper, "We co-signed a loan for him, $45,000, to get him on his feet. The number lands like a cold stone in her stomach. Not just the will, but a debt, a choice made long before the ink dried. She turns away, the kitchen suddenly too small, and walks back to the porch. The revelation churns within her. Not anger, but a tired clarity. They didn't just exclude her. They tethered themselves to her brother's failures, assuming she'd always be there to clean up the mess. That night, she made a decision. No grand gesture, no shouted vows, just a quiet unraveling. She logs into her bank account and cancels the automatic transfer of $600 that covers their monthly internet and gas bills. She deletes the recurring order for their grocery delivery, the one that arrives every Tuesday with low-sugar cereal and fresh produce. She removes the calendar alert that reminds her to refill their prescriptions at the pharmacy 10 miles away. Each click feels like shedding a weight she hadn't named. For the first week, they don't notice. The house hums along, its rhythm unbroken. Then the messages begin. Her father texts first, a curt note. "The electric bill's overdue. Can you look into it?" She lets it sit, unread. Her mother follows 2 days later. "We're out of that herbal tea you always get. Can you grab some?" The screen glows in the dark of her apartment, but she doesn't reply. By the second week, the tone shifts. Her mother writes again. More direct. "The car payment's due. Can you send $1,200 like last time?" The words are bare. No greeting. No inquiry about her day. She stares at the message, the cursor blinking, then types a response. "Ask your son. It's his future now." She hits send and powers off her phone. Her brother chimes in that evening, his message a mix of frustration and plea. "Don't turn this into a thing. Just help them out like you always do." The phrase "like you always do" echoes, a reminder of how her reliability became a cage. She replies, her words measured, "You're the one they banked on. Step up." He doesn't. Right back. The next morning, her mother calls, the phone buzzing relentlessly on her kitchen counter. She lets it ring, the sound fading into the hum of her coffee maker. Another message arrives. "We could lose the car if you don't help." She doesn't respond. The silence she offers is not spite, but a boundary, a line drawn after years of erasing herself for their sake. She sits at her window, the distant peaks of the Cascades etched against the dawn. The weight of their expectations lifts, replaced by a fragile freedom. They didn't lose her when they signed the will or co-signed his loan. They lost her when they believed she'd never stop carrying their burdens. The phone buzzes again, a final plea from her father. "You'd let us fall apart?" She sets it face down, the screen dark, and lets the question dissolve into the morning light. The morning mist clings to the streets of Bend, Oregon, as she sips coffee in her apartment, the window framing the jagged silhouette of the Cascades. 2 weeks have passed since she severed the financial lifelines. Groceries, bills, prescriptions that once tethered her to the family's needs. The silence from her phone, once a relief, now feels like the calm before a storm. She opens her laptop, the screen's glow casting shadows across the room, and checks her messages. A voicemail from her aunt, a woman who rarely reaches out, waits in the queue. "I'm not picking sides," the voice says, soft but pointed. "But your mother's heart is breaking. Can you just call her?" The words linger, not as concern but as a subtle prod, the first ripple of a wider campaign. She hesitates, then opens a social media platform, scrolling through the familiar grid of posts. It doesn't take long to find it. A photo of the family's front porch, the paint peeling from its railings, posted by her mother. The caption reads, "We poured our lives into our children, but love doesn't always come back." No names, but the message is clear, a public lament meant for her. The post has garnered dozens of likes, a chorus of sympathy from distant cousins and old neighbors. Her brother adds a comment. "Family's about being there, not keeping score." Some forget that. The words twist in her chest, not for their truth, but for their audacity, coming from someone who never paid a dime toward the house's upkeep. The comments pile up, each one a small cut. A family friend writes, "You raised them with so much heart. You don't deserve this." Another, someone she hasn't seen since high school, chimes in, "Kids today think they're owed everything." The most painful comes from her cousin, a woman who once shared late-night talks about dreams and burdens. She leaves no words, just a single pine tree emoji, a quiet endorsement of the narrative painting the protagonist as the villain. The betrayal stings deeper than the others, a reminder that even those who saw her sacrifices now buy the rewritten story. She closes the laptop, the room dimming, and paces to the kitchen. Her fingers trace the edge of a countertop, a space she's made her own, free of others' demands. Later that day, a letter arrives, slipped under her door, its plain envelope unmarked. Inside is a photocopy of a bank notice, not addressed to her but unmistakable. The family's house, 3 months behind on payments, now flagged for foreclosure. She sits with it, the paper heavy in her hands, and checks the county's website. On her phone. The property's status confirms it, delinquent, no savings left to bridge the gap. Her brother, entrusted with their future, has squandered it, likely on fleeting whims or failed ventures, while her parents clung to the hope she'd relent. Once, she would have acted, called the bank, rearranged her budget, and found a way to save them. Now, she folds the notice and sets it aside, pouring a glass of water that tastes sharper in the quiet. The family's posts, their pleas, their public shaming, they're not just cries for help, but a strategy to bend her will. She won't break. The mountains outside stand unmoved, their peaks cutting through the fog. She thinks of the $700 she once spent to fix the porch railing, the countless hours spent ensuring their comfort. They didn't value it then, and now they rewrite her as the one who failed them. The phone remains silent, but she knows it won't last. The world they've built without her is crumbling, and they'll soon come knocking, expecting her to rebuild it. The early November sky over Bend, Oregon, hangs heavy with clouds, casting a muted light across the downtown office building where she works. The glass facade reflects the blurred outlines of pine trees, a stark contrast to the tension brewing within. 3 weeks after the social media posts and the foreclosure notice, her phone buzzes mid-morning, the front desk's number flashing. The receptionist's voice is polite but hesitant. "Your parents and brother are here. They say it's urgent and want to come up." Her fingers pause over the keyboard, the spreadsheet on her screen forgotten. She takes a slow breath, the air cool against her lips, and responds, "Tell them I'm unavailable. They weren't expected." A pause, then, "They say they'll wait." She nods to no one, her voice steady. "Let them." For 25 minutes, she continues her work, reviewing a construction timeline, drafting an email to a client, each task a deliberate act of defiance against their intrusion. The clock ticks toward noon when she finally rises, smoothing her blazer, and heads downstairs. The lobby is sterile, its tiled floor gleaming under fluorescent lights. Her family stands clustered near the entrance, an awkward tableau of expectation. Her father's posture is rigid, hands clasped behind his back like a man bracing for a lecture. Her mother grips a canvas tote bag, her knuckles pale, eyes darting nervously. Her brother slouches, staring at his shoes, his jacket rumpled as if he rolled out of bed. They turn as one when she steps through the glass doors, but no one speaks first. She crosses her arms, planting herself a few feet away, the distance deliberate. Her mother breaks the silence, voice fraying at the edges. "We need to sort this out." The protagonist doesn't blink, her gaze steady. Her father clears his throat, his tone sharp with impatience. "You're going to let the bank take the house after everything we've done for you?" The accusation lands, but she lets it sit, unyielding. "You wrote me out," she says, each word measured. You handed it all to him, and now you're here, asking for the same help I gave. For years. Her eyes flick to her brother, who shifts uncomfortably but says nothing. Her mother steps closer, her tote bag swinging slightly. We never meant to hurt you, she says, softer now, almost pleading. We thought you'd understand. You've always been the one who holds things together. The familiar praise, once a comfort, now feels like a chain. You used that to erase me, she replies, her voice low but unshaken. You leaned on my strength and called it duty. Her brother finally mutters, his words half lost, something about not wanting any of this mess. But you took it, she cuts in, her tone slicing through his excuse. You let them build their world around you, and you gave nothing back. He looks away, jaw tight, offering no defense. Her father's hands drop to his sides, his voice rising. We raised you, fed you, gave you a home. You owe us. The claim sparks a faint, bitter smile on her lips. I paid that debt, she says, with every dollar, every hour, every choice I made for you. And you repaid me with a single line in a will. Her mother's eyes glisten, her voice trembling. We didn't know you'd pull away like this. The protagonist steps forward just once, her words final. You didn't know I'd stop carrying you. That's the difference. She raises a hand as her brother reaches for the door, his intent to follow her inside clear. Don't, she says, her voice a quiet command. You're not coming in. You're not part of my life anymore. The words hang in the air, heavy but unshakable. They stand frozen, three figures who once defined her world, now strangers on the wrong side of a line she's drawn. She turns, the lobby doors hissing shut behind her, and walks back to the elevator. The hum of the building fills the silence, grounding her. They didn't lose her when they chose her brother or aired their grievances online. They lost her when they assumed her loyalty was endless. As the elevator doors close, she exhales, the weight of their expectations falling away, leaving only the clarity of her oath. The November wind sweeps through Bend, Oregon, carrying the sharp tang of frost as she walks along a quiet street, her boots crunching on fallen leaves. A month has passed since the confrontation in the office lobby, and the silence from her family has settled into a steady hum, no longer a storm, but a distant echo. She pauses at a corner, her breath visible in the 40-degree air, and glances down a familiar road leading to the old neighborhood. Compelled by a quiet urge, she follows it, her steps unhurried, until the family's house comes into view. A faded for sale sign leans in the overgrown yard, the grass brittle, the porch bare of its once familiar wind chimes. The windows are dark, the life she once sustained gone, leaving only a shell of wood and memory. She stands on the sidewalk, hands in her coat pockets, and takes in the sight. The house no longer pulls at her, its weight lifted by her refusal to carry it. She thinks of the $900 she once paid to replace the storm-damaged gutters, the late nights spent researching loan options to keep it afloat. Those acts, once proof of love, now feel like relics of a role she's shed. In their place, she's built something new, a life of her choosing. She's enrolled in a leadership course, its virtual sessions sparking ideas for a career shift. She's planned a solo hike along a 15-mile trail in the Cascades, a promise to rediscover the world on her terms. Her apartment, once a functional space, now holds traces of her, books stacked on a shelf, a sketch pad filled with tentative drawings. Her phone vibrates, a faint pulse against her palm. The screen shows missed notifications, 2 calls from her mother, 1 from her father, a voicemail she doesn't play. Their absence no longer stings, only reinforces the space she's claimed. She mutes the device, slipping it back into her pocket, and turns away from the house. The street stretches ahead, lined with bare trees silhouetted against the dusk. She walks on, the cold air bracing but not biting, each step a quiet affirmation. They didn't lose her when they favored her brother or sought to shame her publicly. They lost her when they mistook her strength for obligation, believing she'd never walk away. As the horizon glows with the last light of day, her voice cuts through, steady and clear. If you've ever been expected to stay silent, to give without return, leave a star in the comments. Some of us never shouted, but we never vanished. The Cascades loom in the distance, unyielding and free, mirroring the path she's carved. A life no longer defined by what she owes, but by what she chooses to keep.